In the last week of 1966, Carol Burnett picked up a phone and called a vice president at CBS. She told him she was ready to push the button. The executive on the other end of the line either had forgotten the button existed or was hoping she had. He told her, with the confidence of a man who had never been told no by a woman in a business meeting, that variety television was a man's game. It was Sid Caesar, Milton Berle, Jackie Gleason, Dean Martin. It really wasn't for the gals. He offered her a sitcom called Here's Agnes instead. Burnett told him she didn't want to be Agnes. She wanted a variety show with music and sketches and guest stars and a repertory company. And because of a clause buried inside a contract she had signed 4 years earlier, CBS was legally obligated to give it to her whether they wanted to or not. The show that resulted from that phone call ran for 11 seasons, won 25 Emmy Awards, drew 30 million viewers an episode, and changed what a woman was allowed to do on American television forever. This is the story of how Carol Burnett built it, and how she was smart enough to make sure she owned every frame of it. Carol Burnett was born on April 26, 1933, in San Antonio, Texas, the only child of Jody and Ina Louise Burnett. Her parents were both alcoholics who were largely absent from her childhood in the practical sense. Present enough to be painful, not present enough to be useful. When she was 7 years old, her parents separated, and she was sent to live with her maternal grandmother, Mabel Eudora White, in a one-room apartment in a boarding house on Yucca Street in Hollywood, California. Her grandmother, whom she called Nanny, became the central figure of her childhood and one of the most important relationships of her life. Nanny was, by Burnett's account, a woman of enormous personality and zero filter, funny in a way that was specifically, irreversibly Californian boarding house poor, and endlessly creative within the confines of a life that gave her almost nothing to work with. The two of them went to the movies constantly because movies were cheap and the boarding house was small, and Burnett absorbed the images she saw on those screens in a way that settled into her and never left. She enrolled at UCLA, intending to study journalism and become a playwright. Acting was a required component of her theater arts major. When she got on stage for the first time in a class production, the trajectory of everything changed. She was, from her very first moment in front of an audience, exactly where she was supposed to be, funny in a way that was completely natural and completely unafraid. Near the end of her junior year at UCLA, her professor held a party, and a man and his wife attended whom Burnett had never met. During the evening, Burnett mentioned that she and her boyfriend wanted to move to New York and try to break into musical theater, but couldn't afford it. The stranger, whose name she never learned and has never been able to determine, offered her an interest-free loan of $1,000. He asked for two things in return: that she use the money only for the purpose she had described, and that if it ever worked out, she'd pay it forward someday and help someone else the way he had helped her. Burnett has told this story in interviews for decades, and she has never stopped being visibly moved by it. She took the money. She and her boyfriend drove to New York. The loan was never repaid to its source because she was never able to find him again. New York in the mid-1950s was exactly the city a person with Burnett's talent and energy needed. She did club work, auditions, showcases, anything she could get. In 1959, she was cast in a Broadway musical called Once Upon a Mattress, playing Princess Winifred, a loud, ungainly, completely irresistible comic heroine, and the performance made her a genuine star. CBS noticed. In 1959, she joined The Gary Moore Show as a supporting cast member and became, over the next 3 years, one of the most beloved performers on American television without technically being the lead of anything. When she left Moore's Show in 1962 to pursue film and Broadway work and headline her own specials, CBS signed her to a 10-year contract that formalized their relationship and guaranteed her regular appearances and specials. The contract included a standard set of obligations for both sides, but it also included something unusual, a clause that said, within the first 5 years, Burnett and only Burnett had the option to demand 31-hour variety shows, pay or play. The network had to put them on the air. CBS did not have any say in the matter. The clause was hers, not theirs, which is the kind of contractual detail that sounds like a formality until someone actually uses it. For 4.5 years, Burnett didn't use it. She wasn't sure she was a variety show host. She had never run her own program before. She later said the idea of carrying a full hour every week with music and costumes and guest stars and sketches felt enormous and uncertain. Then, in the final week of the 5th year, she and her husband and producing partner Joe Hamilton sat down and looked at each other and said, maybe it was time to push the button. She called CBS. The executive told her variety was a man's game. He offered her Here's Agnes. She said no. CBS was obligated by contract to give her 31-hour variety shows, pay or play, and there was nothing a vice president's opinion about gender and genre could do about it. The Carol Burnett Show launched on September 11th, 1967. It ran until March 29th, 1978. It was start to finish one of the greatest television programs ever made. What Burnett did on that show was something nobody had done before. Not just because she was a woman hosting a variety program, though that alone was historically significant, but because of the specific kind of comedy she brought to it. She was willing to be ugly on screen. She was willing to be physically ridiculous, to contort her face into something completely unrecognizable from the glamorous images television preferred. She played charwomen and desperate housewives and faded movie stars, embodying types that other performers of her standing would have considered beneath them. She broke character on camera when something struck her as genuinely funny, and the audience broke with her, and those moments became as beloved as the sketches themselves. She built a repertory company: Harvey Korman, Vicki Lawrence, Lal Waggoner, Tim Conway, and treated the whole enterprise less like a network production and more like a theatrical troupe that happened to be on television. She opened every episode by turning the lights up on the audience and answering their questions, unscripted and unguarded, before a single sketch had been performed. She gave people herself before she gave them a character, and they loved her for it across 11 seasons without the feeling ever going stale. The ownership structure behind the show is the part of the story that tends to get overlooked, and it may be the most significant professional decision she ever made. Her production company, Wacko Incorporated, retained the masters to all 279 episodes. CBS did not own the library. Burnett did. Every time the show has been syndicated, repackaged, released on DVD, or licensed to a streaming platform since 1978, the revenue has flowed directly to her company. Not to a corporate rights holder, not to a network archive, but to Carol Burnett. When the first 5 seasons were locked in a legal dispute with the original production company for decades and couldn't be syndicated, it was her loss, but also her asset to resolve when the time came. The 2015 DVD release, marketed as The Lost Episodes, was hers to authorize. The streaming deals are hers to negotiate. She built a show and then built a vault, and the vault has been generating income for nearly 50 years. She ended the show herself in 1978, the same way Mary Tyler Moore had ended hers the year before. Not because she was asked to, not because the ratings demanded it, but because she decided it was time. CBS had already renewed it for a 12th season. Burnett said no. Ratings do not have a thing to do with my decision, she said at the time. They have been much lower before. And CBS picked the show up for a 12th year. But it's classier to leave before you're asked to go. I'm proud of our show. The vice president who had offered her a sitcom called Here's Agnes was not in the room for that conversation. The legacy she left behind is not easily contained in a single description. She was the first woman to successfully host a primetime variety show in American television history. Every female comedian who came after her, Lily Tomlin, Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, and dozens of others who have cited her directly, inherited some portion of the playbook she wrote. In 1976, she sued the National Enquirer for libel over a fabricated story and won, establishing a legal precedent that changed how supermarket tabloids operated.